Welcome back, my noble squire, for it is I, King Thor. I bring you the tale of a boy who died protecting strangers, only to awaken as a 3-year-old noble in a world of swords, magic, and monsters. But when the gods themselves summon him to their realm, they don't give him one blessing. They give him all of them. Let us begin.
Pour.
A young teenage boy named Kazuya heads out one ordinary day, completely unaware that life is about to hit him with a massive plot twist. After all, fate has a strange way of changing everything in a single moment. Just then, he notices a dangerous man threatening several girls with a knife. Without thinking twice, Kazuya rushes forward and tackles the man to the ground in an attempt to save them. Sadly, during the struggle, he is stabbed and loses his life. But death is not the end of his story. Kazuya suddenly wakes up in the body of a young child. Confused and disoriented, he stares at his reflection in a mirror and realizes that he is no longer himself. Before he can fully process what happened, a woman named Sarah enters the room. She is relieved to see him awake after he had been unconscious for an entire week. Thinking he must be hungry, Sarah asks the maid, Sylvia, to bring him some soup. After telling him to rest, they leave the room, giving Kazuya time to think. Slowly, he realizes the impossible truth. He has been reincarnated into another world. Curious about his surroundings, he begins observing everything around him, trying to understand where he is. When Sylvia returns with the soup, she gently feeds him and answers the many questions running through his mind. That is when Kazuya learns that he is now a 3-year-old boy named Kane. Kane is the third son of a powerful noble named Garm, a respected commander whose army protects the kingdom of Esfort from foreign invaders. The moment Kane hears about swords, magic, and monsters, excitement fills his heart. He quickly realizes he has been reborn into a fantasy world similar to the stories and games he once loved. Eager to learn magic immediately, he asks Sylvia about it, but she explains that he first needs to learn basic reading and writing. Determined to grow stronger, Kane throws himself into studying. Not long after, his family is shocked to discover that he has already learned how to read, write, and even solve mathematical problems. His sister, Rain, proudly points out how intelligent he has become, leading everyone to believe that Kane is a child prodigy. In reality, however, he still carries the mind of a former high school student. His sudden change in personality surprises the family, especially because Kane had never shown interest in studying before. When questioned, Kane simply explains that he wants to learn everything he can about the world. Garm supports his curiosity, believing knowledge will help Kane succeed in life. Because of this, he allows Kane access to books about history and magic. Sarah is happy to see her son taking interest in magic as well, although she believes he is still too young to properly use it. However, she encourages him to continue studying. What nobody realizes is that Kane has already begun using magic in secret. Unfortunately, he struggles to control it, forcing him to hide his abilities from everyone around him. As time passes, Rain helps teach Kane more about the world outside their home. She explains the 300-year history of the kingdom of Esfort and introduces him to the many races that inhabit the land. 2 years later, the day of Kane's baptism finally arrives. The family travels by carriage to the ceremony, and Kane becomes excited seeing the outside world for the very first time. During the trip, he asks Rain to show him her status after completing her own baptism. Rainy opens her status window, revealing that she can use 3 types of elemental magic. Sarah explains that Rainy received a level 2 blessing from the god of magic. These blessings are incredibly important because they determine how efficiently a person can use magic and skills. According to Sarah, blessings normally range from level 1 to level 5 and are granted by the 7 pillar gods worshipped throughout the kingdom. Soon they arrive at the ceremony hall, where statues of the 7 gods stand tall before them. As everyone kneels, the priest begins the ritual and prays for the gods to guide Kane's future path. Suddenly, a brilliant light fills the room. In an instant, Cain is transported to the realm of the gods. Shocked beyond belief, he discovers that the gods have actually been waiting for him. They address him by his former name, Kazuya, confirming that they know about his previous life. The god of creation, Zenom, introduces himself first. Although Cain secretly questions the god's strange appearance, Zenom immediately responds to his thoughts, reminding him that nothing can be hidden from a god. Soon after, the goddess of death and rebirth, Rime, reveals the truth about Kazuya's death. She explains that his death was never supposed to happen. If she had not interfered, the thug would have tripped and been captured without anyone getting hurt. Hearing this devastates Cain, making him feel as though he died for no reason. However, the god of Earth explains that Kazuya's selfless courage deeply moved the gods. Because of his bravery and kindness, they chose to reincarnate him into this new world. Rime apologizes again, explaining that Cain was not meant to regain memories of his previous life at such a young age. Surprisingly, Cain tells her he does not mind. Thanks to those memories, he was able to adapt quickly, learn new skills, and enjoy life with his new family. The gods become impressed by his attitude, and one by one, they begin granting Cain their blessings. The god of magic grants him powerful magical talent. Zenom follows by giving his own blessing, while the god of war gives Cain mastery over swordsmanship and martial arts. The god of technology encourages him to use knowledge from his previous life to improve the world around him. The god of commerce grants him abilities such as judgment and item box skills, while the god of earth blesses him with several rare abilities. By the time the ceremony ends, Cain has received blessings from every single god. When he returns to the ceremony hall, the priest is stunned by the overwhelming light shining from the statues. Realizing something extraordinary happened, he asks to see Cain's status window. But Cain immediately senses that revealing the truth could bring trouble. Thinking quickly, he grabs his stomach and runs away, pretending to feel sick. Once alone, he checks his status window for himself and is left speechless. Every single blessing, skill, and magical ability he received is at level 10. Cain remembers that level 5 was supposed to be the absolute limit, leaving him wondering what the gods were thinking when they empowered him so heavily. Thankfully, he also notices that Zenom granted him the ability to hide his true status from others. Later that day, Cain joins his family at the dinner table, where everyone discusses the mysterious light from the ceremony. Garm eventually asks to see Cain's status. Believing he successfully concealed his abilities, Cain nervously shows it to them. Even with the concealment active, the family is completely shocked by his numbers, especially his magical power. Garm admits that even the kingdom's royal mages could never compare to Cain's talent. Realizing how dangerous such power could appear, Garm warns Cain never to reveal his true abilities to anyone. Otherwise, the kingdom might begin to fear him as a threat. That night, Cain returns to his room and begins wondering what normal stats are supposed to look like. While searching through his books, he discovers one about summoning magic. Curious and excited, he decides to test the spell outside, hoping to summon a cute and fluffy creature. Unfortunately, things go horribly wrong. Instead of a harmless animal, Cain accidentally summons a demon. The creature immediately becomes violent and attacks Rain, who just happens to be passing nearby. Panicking, Cain fires a powerful flame spell at the demon, but the monster grabs onto him before he can escape. Desperate to protect his sister, Cain uses a return spell to send the demon back where it came from. The moment the danger passes, Cain collapses from exhaustion and loses consciousness. When he finally wakes up, the first thing he sees is Rain smiling at him with relief and gratitude, proud that her little brother risked everything to protect her. Because sometimes, true strength is not measured by power alone, but by the courage to protect the people you care about. As time passes, Cain is formally introduced to the public during his noble debut ceremony. Standing before the crowd, he boldly declares that his dream is to become an adventurer and protect the people around him. Garm is proud of his ambition, but he reminds Cain that strength alone is not enough. To achieve his goal, he must continue studying and improving himself. Because of this, Garm arranges for 2 tutors to personally train him. Later, while waiting in his room, Cain wonders what kind of people his tutors will be. Before long, they arrive. The first tutor, Millie, nervously introduces herself with a polite greeting, while the second tutor, Nina, gives only a short and cold introduction. Embarrassed by Nina's attitude, Millie quickly apologizes for her behavior. However, Cain calmly tells them they do not need to act so formal around him, since they are his teachers. His kindness immediately helps both women relax. Garm explains that they will train Cain for the next 3 years, and his lessons begin right away. The group heads to the training grounds, where Millie asks Cain to practice a few sword swings. To her shock, his movements are far too skilled for a child his age. Nina jokingly comments that Cain may already be better than Millie, which irritates her enough to challenge him to a mock battle. The sparring match begins, and Cain rushes toward Nina with incredible speed. Even Nina struggles to block his attacks properly. Surprised by his talent, she asks whether he received the blessing of the god of war. Cain casually admits that he did, while continuing to pressure her with relentless attacks. Millie eventually steps back and admits she cannot keep up with their pace. She suggests moving on to magic training instead. Nina then reveals that she possesses a level 3 blessing from the god of magic and plans to start teaching Cain the basics. But before she can begin, Cain demonstrates several beginner-level spells with ease. Nina is instantly stunned. She realizes that Cain is casting magic without using full incantations, something that normally requires years of advanced training, just to shorten slightly. At that moment, she concludes that Cain is a true genius. Millie then points out something even more shocking. Cain can use every elemental type. Nina refuses to believe it at first because no mage in the world should be capable of controlling all elements so perfectly. Cain simply explains that he also received the blessing of the god of magic. His tutors are left speechless. Things become even more unbelievable when Cain casually pulls towels out of his item box skill after training. At that point, Millie and Nina realize that Cain's abilities are far beyond normal standards. They decided it would be too dangerous to continue training him inside the mansion, since a single mistake could destroy the entire building. The 2 tutors report the situation to Garm and request permission to train Cain outdoors instead. The next day, they travel outside the mansion to continue his lessons safely. Wanting to test his strength, Nina instructs Cain to cast an intermediate-level spell on a nearby boulder. Cain fires a flame spell toward the rock. A massive explosion erupts instantly, completely obliterating the boulder and leaving behind a giant crater. The shockwave even sends his tutors flying backward. Nina quickly tells him that the spell was far stronger than intermediate magic, while Millie wonders how Cain is still standing, without showing any signs of exhaustion. That is when they realize he possesses an unbelievable amount of magical energy. Suddenly, a killer rabbit monster appears and charges directly at Cain. He effortlessly dodges the attack before defeating it with wind magic. Afterwards, he stores the monster inside his item box so he can show his family later. Watching this, Millie mentions how useful an item box would be for adventurers. She explains that magical storage bags exist, but they are extremely expensive and far beyond what she can afford. Soon after, Nina uses a search spell to detect nearby monsters. Curious about the technique, Cain asks her to teach him. After hearing a short explanation, he successfully casts the spell on his first attempt. Not only can he sense nearby creatures, but he can also identify what kind of monsters they are. The group continues hunting monsters together, but eventually one creature escapes deeper into the forest. Cain immediately tries to chase after it, only for Millie to stop him. She explains that the forest is filled with dangerous monsters, capable of attacking the city every few decades, which is why the area is so heavily guarded. That evening, Cain notices that he has already reached level 8. Thanks to one of the blessings granted by the gods, he gains experience at 100 times the normal rate. Realizing how unfairly overpowered he has become, Cain jokingly blames the gods for making him too strong. Later, the group visits the Adventurers Guild Hall to look for quests. While there, they encounter a muscular adventurer who mocks Millie and Nina for spending time with a child. Assuming they are weak adventurers, he rudely asks if their quest involves babysitting. The man then orders Millie to pour him a drink, but she firmly refuses. Nina also steps in, explaining that they are currently on duty. Angered by the rejection, the adventurer grabs Nina aggressively, while his companions restrain Millie. Cain immediately steps forward and slaps the man's hand away, with enough force to send him crashing onto the floor in pain. Furious, the adventurer draws his sword and attacks Cain repeatedly, but Cain effortlessly dodges every strike. Eventually, Cain catches the blade between two fingers before throwing the man outside the guild hall. The man's companions threaten Millie next, but Cain quickly defeats them as well and tosses them outside alongside their leader. Afterward, his tutors thank him for protecting them. Millie is especially shocked to learn that Cain is skilled in martial arts too, but Cain casually claims he only learned it by reading books. The training continues over the next few years, and eventually the day comes when Millie and Nina's contract is about to end. Wanting to thank them for everything they have done, Cain remembers how much Millie once wished for a magical storage bag. Determined to repay their kindness, he heads into the dangerous forest alone to gather the materials needed to create one. Despite facing powerful dragons that would normally require entire parties of high-ranking adventurers to defeat, Cain defeats them effortlessly by himself. However, the enormous pillars of fire created during the battles are spotted by the city guards. Believing the monsters are preparing another large-scale attack, the guards immediately sound the alarm. Garm and his soldiers rush toward the forest, expecting disaster. Instead, they arrive to find a massive crater, and Cain standing safely in the middle of it. After completing his final training session, Cain presents Millie and Nina with the magical bags he created for them. He proudly explains that the bags can store objects as large as an entire mansion, and can only be used by their owners. The tutors are completely stunned because such items would normally be considered treasures valuable enough to shake entire nations. Even so, they gratefully accept Cain's gifts. The three share an emotional farewell, realizing that despite all the chaos and surprises, they genuinely enjoyed the years they spent training together. 2 years pass, and Cain is now 10 years old. The time has finally come for him to travel to the royal capital for his official debut ceremony, an important event required for every noble son in the kingdom. Before the journey begins, Garm explains that the trip should take about a week, as long as monsters do not attack along the way. As their carriage moves through the roads, Cain quietly uses his search skill to scan the surrounding area for danger. Moments later, he suddenly detects something alarming. A group of people is being attacked by monsters nearly 3 kilometers ahead. Garm immediately orders the soldiers to move faster, but Cain realizes they will never arrive in time to save the victims. Without hesitation, he jumps out of the carriage and uses a boost spell to sprint ahead at incredible speed. Meanwhile, the monster attack grows worse. The soldiers escorting a royal carriage are desperately struggling to defend themselves as powerful orcs overwhelm them one after another. Just as a monster prepares to attack the carriage directly, Cain suddenly appears. With overwhelming speed and skill, he cuts through the monsters effortlessly. Using a blazing fire sword, he defeats the orc general and completely turns the battle around. After the fight, Cain checks on the injured soldiers and introduces himself as the son of Garm. He uses healing magic to treat the wounded, but sadly, some of the guards have already died protecting the carriage. Respecting their sacrifice, Cain carefully stores their bodies in his item box so they can later receive a proper burial. At that moment, Garm and the other soldiers finally arrive, only to realize the battle has already ended. Soon, the doors of the royal carriage open, revealing Princess Telestia and Silk, the daughter of a powerful duke. The girls thank Cain for saving them and admit that they watched him fight from inside the carriage. However, the stress of the attack overwhelms Princess Celestia, causing her to collapse from fear and exhaustion. Cain quickly casts a calming spell to ease their emotions and help them relax. Grateful for his kindness, the girls immediately begin taking interest in him. When Silk asks why he was traveling to the capital, Cain explains that he is heading there for his debut ceremony. To his surprise, the girls reveal that they will also be attending their own debut ceremonies at the royal capital. From that point onward, the girls insist that Cain travel together with them inside the royal carriage. Unfortunately for Cain, the journey quickly becomes awkward because both girls constantly fight for his attention. Sitting between them during the trip makes him extremely uncomfortable, and every time he tries to move seats, the girls refuse to let him leave. Eventually, the group stops at a town to rest for the night. Princess Celestia and Silk immediately request that Cain stay in the same room as them because they still feel traumatized from the monster attack and feel safest when he is nearby. Garm tries to object, pointing out that it would be inappropriate for boys and girls to share a room. However, the girls continue insisting that they are too frightened to sleep alone. After being pressured non-stop, Cain reluctantly agrees, but only because the room is large enough to keep some distance between them. Unfortunately for him, things only get worse. The girls move their beds closer and closer to his, eventually insisting that Cain sleep in the middle so they can feel safe. Throughout the night, they cling to him out of fear, leaving Cain far too nervous and embarrassed to sleep properly. This situation repeats itself for several nights during the journey, leaving Cain completely sleep-deprived by the time they finally arrive at the royal capital. Once they step out of the carriage, they are greeted by Gazard, the vice-captain of the Royal Knights. He personally thanks Cain for rescuing the girls and protecting the royal escort. Cain then removes the bodies of the fallen guards from his item box, explaining that the soldiers fought bravely against the orcs until the very end. As Cain prepares to leave, Gazard suddenly stops him and informs him that the king wishes to see him immediately. Cain is escorted to the royal audience chamber, where he finally meets the king face to face. After respectfully greeting the royal family, Cain listens as the king publicly praises him for saving the royal carriage and defeating the orc forces. The king openly acknowledges that Princess Celestia and Silk might not have survived without Cain's actions. As a reward for his achievements, the king grants Cain the noble title of Baron and even awards him his own mansion. However, one noble named Corgino objects to the decision, arguing that Cain is far too young to receive such an important title. The king quickly shuts down the criticism by pointing out that none of the nobles present could accomplish what Cain achieved at only 10 years old. Unable to argue against that, Corgino falls silent. Although Cain feels uncomfortable accepting such a high position, he reluctantly agrees to become a baron. After the royal meeting ends, Cain heads backstage with Garm. There, Garm proudly comments that Cain has become the first among his sons to earn a noble promotion. A short while later, the king personally enters the room alongside the duke. To Cain's surprise, both men lower their heads and sincerely thank him for saving their daughters. Embarrassed by the situation, Cain quickly asks them to stop bowing to him. However, the king explains that he is speaking not as a ruler, but as a grateful father. The conversation soon takes an unexpected turn. The king explains that because Cain possesses extraordinary talent in both magic and swordsmanship, along with blessings from multiple gods, the kingdom cannot risk allowing someone like him to act freely without stronger ties to the royal family. For that reason, the king proposes that Cain become engaged to Princess Celestia. At the same time, the duke reveals that he also wants Cain to marry his daughter, Silk. Cain is completely stunned by the sudden proposal, while the two girls seem far happier about the idea than he is. The king then jokingly points out that Cain already spent several nights sharing a room with both girls during the trip, making the engagement seem even more reasonable. It quickly becomes obvious that the entire situation was carefully planned to keep Cain closely connected to the kingdom. With everyone pressuring him at once, Cain eventually gives in and reluctantly agrees to the engagements, officially tying his future to both girls and the royal family. And so, my loyal squire, a boy blessed by gods beyond human limits, now stands at the edge of a future the world was never meant to grant him. Because the most dangerous power is not the strength to fight, but the strength that makes even the gods hesitate. If you wish to witness what becomes of Cain, speak it below in the comments, and the next chronicle shall be revealed.